In their journey to develop their extraordinary talents and to be in service of others, many people experience becoming more aware of their purpose, their impact, and why their work is so meaningful to them and why it's so healing to them. Several guests have talked about the benefits of becoming more aware, from increasing acceptance of self to being able to choose their right next step aligned with their values. And yet there's more. In addition to that personal growth, there's the increasing impact their work has on others. Today, we're joined by Mai Moore, the former technology executive turned social justice leader, as we explore her experience with her superpower, awakening awareness, and the benefits our own increasing awareness has on our ability to impact the people and communities we serve.
I believe that we need to be more awake around people, right? And different kinds of people, different kinds of ideas, different notions of thought and patterns, and what people are going to, and be receptive to it and embrace it in order to be awake. And there is this great demand for a new way of leading. We don't have a lot of great demonstrations of leadership. And I believe also that we have to be people that actually implement what we say, not just be talkers. I believe that I'm an example of that with the work that I've done. But I think that awakeness is a journey. You know, some days I feel very awake. Some days I'm very sleepy, right? Especially in the state of world we are, and, you know, how overwhelming it is.
This is the first episode in this podcast series where we explore the role that hope has with a guest's superpower and their journey towards their potential and possible self. And to be clear, when we're talking about hope, we're using a definition that emphasizes belief and agency, not a wish, not a prayer, but belief and agency. And Mai picks up and runs with this definition of hope and amplifies it by suggesting that when tied together with authenticity, it makes a bigger impact and fuels more hope.
Hope is great, but we need to put it actually into action. We need to learn how to execute, and we need to actually create that hope. And we hold the power to create that hope. I think the other thing with hope is we have to be honest, meaning that it's sometimes dangerous to see this toxic positivity around hope when it's not actually true. And I think that that's why right now I believe that we're in an impact economy where we have to take action and actually, you know, support the builders and people who are actually doing the work right now, because we're literally right now shaping the entire next era of the world right now. All of us. Yeah, let's keep being hope dealers, authentic hope dealers, I should say.
Hi, I'm Roger Kastner, and I'm the host of the What Do You Know to Be True podcast. For over 25 years, I've been working with leaders and teams to co-create pathways to being better versions of themselves. And these conversations are intended to amplify the stories and experiences of people who have done just that. In these conversations, I talk with ordinary people about their extraordinary skill, their superpower, and the meaningful impact it has on others. The goal is not to try to emulate or hack our way to new talent. Instead, the intention is to learn more about their experience with their superpower, and in doing so, maybe we can learn something about the special talent in each of us that drives us towards our potential and living into our possibilities. If you're ready, let's dive in. Hello, Mai. Thank you for joining me today. I'm grateful we're here together.
Super amazing to be here. Thanks so much, Roger. I admire your work and really grateful that you have had me on here.
My pleasure. I'm really excited for this conversation and learning more about your superpower of awakening awareness. That sounds really important, especially in times like it is now. And I think we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are important right now for people. But before we get too far, what's important for us to know about you?
I call myself #almost social impact. For a couple of reasons. But yes, as you mentioned, I'm all about awakening awareness so that people can see more clearly, so they can lead better. And ultimately, my vision is really here to create a more connected, empowered, and transformative world.
I love that. And you mentioned the almost social impact. I'm very curious because I see that in your post and your writing. I don't quite know. I don't know if I could articulate it. So tell us a little bit more about what that means to you.
Sure. So, just giving a little history, not to go into too depth, but I spent like well over 20 years in the tech industry. I helped two companies go public. Then I co-founded a nonprofit called EYEJ, Empowering Youth Exploring Justice, which is all about empowering young advocates for change, really helping them implement the idea they have around different social injustice areas and serve 2,000 underserved youth there. Became a founder of Boss Me In, which is all about bridging the intergenerational gap, i.e., intergenerational leadership between executives and Gen Z. And this hashtag, almost social impact, came a couple months ago. I moved back to New York City. And, in those transition times, you're really reflecting, like, what the heck have I been doing for the last 13 years in social impact? And I happened to actually stumble across, I don't know if you know this Indian comedian, her name pronunciation is Zarnag, but I could be wrong. Anyways, I was just on her social media and it said almost comedian. And I said, how fitting is that, especially in this time where new Arab leadership is demanded, where, it's really not about titles anymore, and everybody is striving, really well, not everybody, a lot of people are striving to do good in this world, and really just a humble approach to social impact.
It makes me think about this idea that sometimes we're just trying to become who we originally were.
Mm,
Some have quoted Ram Dass and the idea of like we're just walking each other home, and
mm,
so this idea of almost social impact makes me think of like we're doing the unfolding, we're doing the learning, the unlearning, and we're trying to get back to who we
yes,
were, before the world was made.
yes.
Is that sort of in line with what the thinking is?
Yeah, and then also I think we are continuously learning and growing. There's this never-ending growth pattern and journey of life, and we're never perfect at anything, really. So, yeah.
I love that. And that speaks to your superpower of awakening awareness. A few of our guests have talked about the criticality of awareness, specifically this idea of arriving, being aware of what is so that we can better choose our intentional response to that situation. So tell us your definition or your experience with awakening awareness, and what does that do or enable for the person who is now awakened to their awareness?
At the time when you're in the moment, you don't necessarily realize that you're awakening awareness. So meaning, I was literally empowering young people, amplifying their voice, trying to get them heard. But I think about also impact and how a lot of us are taking a lot of initiative towards building and creating impact, but it hasn't always been positive, right? You look at the world right now, and a lot of the efforts made have actually set us backwards in some ways. I believe that we need to be more awake around people, right? And different kinds of people, different kinds of ideas, different notions of thought and patterns, and what people are going to, and be receptive to it and embrace it, in order to be awake. And there is this great demand for a new way of leading. We don't have a lot of great demonstrations of leadership. And I believe also that we have to be people that actually implement what we say, not just be talkers. I believe that I'm an example of that with the work that I've done. And yes, there are many awake people as well. But I think that awakeness is a journey. Some days I feel very awake, some days I'm very sleepy, right? Especially in the state of world we are, and how overwhelming it is. But to your point, I love what you said. It's very beautiful that a lot of us may or may not have felt this moment of being within our true selves and being within our purpose and being within our calling. And to your point, some of us have felt it. I know that I'm very confident of it. And there's times when I have felt, pushed down, oppressed, and that noise and that pain and that struggle can help sometimes make us forget, right? And so I think we have to be reminded as well, and we have to keep on going and keep practicing, because it's really it seems like it's this big grand idea, but it's really just being human. It's just being
Mm.
what I call normal.
Yeah, we've had several conversations about the stories we tell,
Mm,
and it's just sort of how we interpret the world. And some of those stories are very much externally oriented about the way things are, and trying to make sense of the way things are, and how do we navigate through adversity and opportunity and the things that get in our way. I love this idea of awakening to awareness that not only are those stories that we're creating, or maybe they've been handed to us, but that we also have the ability to change
mm,
those stories.
mm,
And we can only change those stories once we become aware of those
mm.
stories. So that's what's coming up in my awareness. How does that land on you?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful. I'm going through that right now. First of all, change is normal, and we've been taught in society that change is such a negative thing, and it's just a part of life, right? And so hopefully we can put some positivity around it. But I think about just even, moving back to New York and just thinking about what I've been through. I've been through my own struggles. There was a point with EYEJ. I had this very successful career before. I was very lucky at a very young age to see so much success. And with EYEJ, there was a point that I was homeless as a single mom, with a little kid, pushing EYJ forward because I believed in it so much, and I believe in young people so much.
Mm.
And having to retrain myself and change while navigating, creating reform and changing ways for other people to know that to get back into abundance, if that makes any sense. To know
It
that,
sure does.
the world is for you. And I think a lot of people have a really hard time with that, especially right now. There's a lot of fear, which is normal, especially when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and creating, great impact, because fear tells us something. But um, we are worthy. We deserve a lot, especially people who are working hard for others and community. And we have to do the work within ourselves. Period. Point blank. And that's a hard lesson. Sometimes that's easier to say to younger people than it is to older. I'm around a lot of executive women, um, and I've dabbled in a lot of different parts of society. I've been around, billionaires, development, projects. I've been around returning citizens who've come out of, prison and are trying to make their life better. Again, around youth, I've seen youth murdered. I've seen a lot, right? And ultimately, we are human. We are human, and I think there's because of capitalism, we've been taught a lot about ego, and it's a very ego can be a great thing because it can tell you your worth, but it can also be a killer. I was just telling my team this morning about that, and I think in the corporate world there is still a lot of ego and entitlement, and it's very toxic. And I think it is harder to change, in my opinion, as you get older, because we get into our ways and we are again human. We've got to do the hard work and face ourselves. And I see in society that there are people that are doing this, which is very exciting, very, very exciting. And then there are people that are staying very status quo because they don't want to lose what they have.
Yeah, that's that scarcity versus abundance, the
Mm,
finite versus infinite thinking.
yes.
You just shared quite a few different experiences that I could see that contributes to your superpower. But what would you say or would you say there's one or two instances or people that inspired you to have the superpower of awakening awareness?
That's a great question. People often ask me, like, who are my heroes and who do I look up to? I am very attracted to wisdom. And I've always been a very, very big thinker. So seeing people, like big time, like Madonna or, like the Michelle Obamas, that inspires me. Just because I could see a woman, having multiple businesses, constantly changing, and empowering community. I think about also my parents, and not necessarily in a positive way that you would think that they were my role models, that I need to, that they were my examples in this way. I think it was actually the opposite. I think that it's not only them, a lot of boomers, I have seen are unwilling to change, right? Or are unwilling to face themselves. And I don't want to put them down. My mom is incredible. She left home when she was 13 to become an assistant concertmaster. But that avoidance mentality, and I don't blame them. That's been taught by culture, right? And that's been by design. But that avoidance kind of culture, I see it even in Gen Z. I see it sometimes in myself, and it's very, very dangerous, and hence why we are where we are right now. So my point is, I think I've been always kind of a rebel and just really been an observer since literally I was 1 years old, observing people, culture, how things work. And I think it also has to do with, honestly, I'm a Gen X, and I think sometimes I feel like Gen X's have it the worst because we're seeing the old way, we're seeing the new way, and we're kind of in the middle trying to change those generational curses too.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Now I want to ask you about hope. And I'd shared this definition with you before we got online that was put together by psychologist Charles R. Schneider, who defined hope as this positive motivational state that's a combination of goals and having a desired set of goals, having a pathway that helps you achieve those goals, and then agency, that belief that you can make change happen and achieve those goals. And I'm really curious about your relationship between your superpower of awakening awareness and hope,
Mm-hmm.
as defined by this definition of the combination of goals, path, and agency.
And in my eyes, hope is great, but we need to put it actually into action. We need to learn how to execute, and we need to actually create that hope. And we hold the power to create that hope. I think the other thing with hope is, and thinking about new era of leadership and just awakening awareness, is that we have to be honest, meaning that it's sometimes dangerous to see this toxic positivity around hope when it's not actually true. And there's many reasons for that, whether it's social media or capitalism, or different reasonings, cultural. And I think that that's why right now I believe that we're in an impact economy where we have to take action and actually support the builders and people who are actually doing the work right now, because we're literally right now shaping the entire next era of the world right now, all of us. So back to hope. Yes, I think it's absolutely important. I believe that young people bring hope. I think everybody has the ability to bring hope, and hope helps to keep us awakened in some ways, to keep moving forward, to your point, towards our goals, towards our purpose, towards what we need to implement and execute. I think though, equitably, we have to remember that sometimes those pathways to the goals are not always the same for everybody. Sometimes there are setbacks. Just being realistic of what kind of society we're in. We're not in a truly abundant society, right? And sometimes abundance gets a lot of pushback as well. And sometimes we'll just see glimpses of abundance. But yeah, let's keep being hope dealers, authentic hope dealers, I should say. And we all hold the power. I mean, Roger, you're a hope dealer for sure. I'm admire you for doing this work and just being awake and being, cultivating these conversations that can lead to different ideas and provide hope and, you never know what will come out of this for people. Other people may be inspired to take action as well.
Well, and that's the goal of these conversations. I originally, before they turned into a podcast, they're a way, I found them to be a way to inspire me to live more into my purpose, my potential, my possible self. And I wanted to not only amplify the perspectives of the people I was talking to, but then hopefully inspire other people, because I think there is something, and the more and more I think about it, this idea of awakening awareness is super powerful. Again, this idea that we talked earlier about the stories we tell ourselves and how those limiting beliefs have a huge impact on who we are. Being able to, as we were just talking about hope and these pathways, and where those pathways are not equitable for everyone, then I go back to this idea that I learned through a nonprofit that my son, youth leadership development nonprofit called Global Visionaries, that my son went through, and I became a board member. All the work was based on this quote by Lilla Watson of, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here with the realization that your liberation and my liberation is tied together, let's get to work.
That's a big quote right there.
It's powerful.
That, Roger, you need to spread that literally everywhere. I'm not joking. We could go into a whole other conversation about nonprofits, or even, people coming to help. But to me, a lot of times that help can be sometimes very selfish, meaning, are you really here to help the mission, at hand? That's a powerful quote.
I think that is something where a lot of people get involved from a volunteer standpoint, from a donation standpoint with nonprofits, where that willingness to help, there's strings attached.
And it's not only within nonprofits, just to be clear, it's within corporations, it's within startups, it's needed within Gen Z, Gen X, doesn't matter. That applies across the board.
Yeah, and this I think this goes back to what Simon Sinek's been talking about a lot around infinite games and finite games, and the approach. And it's, to me, it just sounds like scarcity and abundance. And if you approach, whether it's work or whether it's community, if you approach it like there's a finite or a scarcity amount of resources, you're having to make choices that are only focused on a few, and maybe only on yourself. Whereas if you think about things in the more in line with natural law, that things are infinite, that there's enough for everyone, you make different choices, you show up differently. And that's where it just really, like, again, your superpower of awakening awareness is just like flashing in front of my eyes around, once you become aware, once you see it, once you start thinking about things in this infinite way, in this abundance mindset, you make different decisions, you show up differently.
Definitely.
So what do you know to be true about awakening awareness?
People are so important. That's what awakening awareness is. People are so important. That's really the work that I've been doing. It's nothing else. And when I say people, I'm talking about all of us. I'm talking about white males. I'm talking about underserved Black and brown youth. I'm talking about, executive women. I'm talking about privileged Gen Z. I'm talking about millennials. I'm talking about middle managers. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I believe that this world is really about people. I believe that we are in a very exciting time, honestly, as strange as that sounds, because I see more and more how people are the priority. I see more and more how many people are building right now and really shifting and changing, as you're saying, especially executive women, to go towards their purpose, or trying to shift culture within corporations. I see it. It's happening.
This gets me thinking about the backlash on DEI right now, where there's a certain part of society that feels like they're being left out, that all the focus has gone in another direction. That backlash is fed on this idea of, again, finite games, scarcity. If one person wins, that means someone else loses. And so when you're talking about people and talking about all people, what I hear in that, it's me, it's you, it's all of us together. It's this idea that there is no them, there's only us.
The absolute truth is that there's space for everybody. That's the absolute truth. But it's a complex topic because we who are maybe underserved also need to be ready for that too. Because we may talk and say, we want to even plate or even line, but we have to be ready for that abundance as well. With DEI, like I personally haven't made my like final conclusion around it because it is so complex. Of course, it pisses me off everything that's going on about it, the dismantling of it, the hard work that people have put in literally for hundreds of years, and how important DEI work is. I don't like that it's used as a tool. I don't like that it is, pushed to the side and, it's that department over there. And it's like this, sometimes ugly topic, because the truth is it's really about people. It's really should be implemented across the board and be called something else. It should be ingrained in all leadership, all people. And it's complicated. There is a lot of talk around belonging now, which I think is beautiful. But I think that the world is changing because it's no longer about black versus white. It is also, really about being human now. And I think that, we have to realize we are in a different world and there's good and bad in everything. What I'm trying to say is that the paradigm has shifted, and I think we do need to look at things differently. I do look at it as an opportunity. And I hope and pray, because I know it's hard for people who are so knee deep in this work, that they can look at it that way as an opportunity.
And I think the important thing is to keep talking about it.
Absolutely.
And
Every day.
as a cisgendered straight white male, I think there's a lot of ways that I can contribute to these conversations, but continuing to have the conversations is probably the most important thing.
Just remember, we people who are underrepresented are living this all day, every day. It's not a conversation topic that we, bring up, even if we bring it up once a day, it's all day, and everything that we do all day, we're dealing, with a lot. And it's not to say that other people are not. This is not about victimhood. But it's just a reminder that things need to change. Things need to change.
Yeah. I am very aware that it's my, the privilege that I was given when I was born, not earning it all, allows me to choose whether or not I think about and talk about the topic of equity.
Yes, very true. I look at it a little bit different. I think that honestly, we're all privileged. And that might be a little bit tough to say. And maybe that's more of like an international lens of why I say that. I believe that I'm privileged too. It's really what you're doing with your privilege that matters, and being humble to own it and take action from it, really.
Yeah, so well said. So what did you believe early on about your superpower of awakening awareness that you've come to learn is not true?
For my journey, I have seen so much, and especially just thinking about EYJ or my personal life too. I've a lot of people have faced a lot. So I'm not trying to compare myself against anybody, but you definitely question things at certain points. And, there's points of like, oh my God, is there any good people? Sometimes you think like, sometimes you ask, why have I been given this gift to do this work too? I think that's part of awakening awareness. And the other thing I would say too is I feel like I'm in a more confident place. And what I have learned, to answer your question, is that no one can take your purpose away from you. When you're going through this journey, you question yourself a lot and you have these obstacles and, you ask yourself a million things, and there's insecurity that comes into that, or fear that comes into that. I feel like the lack of confidence has turned into confidence now.
So if you found yourself in front of a few thousand people and you got to give them a key message on awakening awareness, what would that message be?
Depends on the audience, but at the end of the day, I am just me. I'm a human, and I just simply, and it's interesting and maybe a little entertaining. It's not the norm, so to speak, but just to provide, honestly, some hope and inspiration, and just maybe, what I really like to do is to make people think. That's what I like to do, because we need to exercise our brain a little bit and not fall into this trap of, by design, to be unconscious. We need to be conscious.
I love how you tied that all together, like everything in the conversation around stories we're telling ourselves about becoming aware, and not just allowing to go on, autopilot and just go through life. Because I think the system wants us to be on autopilot. The system wants us to try to make things comfortable enough for us.
Even uncomfortable. That's still by design. Even uncomfortable. I mean, look at all the people who are underserved, people who are on welfare, people, there's still a comfort. And some, I'm not going to say all, some people, there's still a comfort there by design. So I was just going to say, to your comment, it's not always the comfort that we think of or the uncomfortable that we think of, because there is comfort in being uncomfortable.
We're constantly looking for fear, and the brain is always seems to be craving certainty, to understand how things are work. And I think that's why sometimes we choose suboptimal living conditions, whether that's physical or emotional, because we know we have certainty around it.
Certainly,
rather than uncertain.
Yeah, and I think it's part of the human trait of survival too. But I think about myself, like I'm the type of person, like I always want to know, like, the answer, right? I always want to know, okay, what's coming up, what's next, and to just remember to be present. Just take a step back, be still, relax. That's hard, especially as a woman. That's hard. But yes, it all ties to the system. The system needs to be, the system is not for everybody. And obviously we see it right now, major problems. And it's going to get a little worse.
Yeah, I think some people have argued that this is the system fighting back. Mm-hmm. And whether that system's capitalism, white supremacy, maybe, mm-hmm. A frothy mix of mm-hmm. both, whatever you want to call it, the system's fighting back.
Yeah. And people are going to suffer because of it too. And I think a lot of people too are being very innovative in thought and building right now and preparing, and creating a world we want to see. Harmony, peace. I think a lot of people desire that.
Oh, I so believe that potential is there. Yes. And check you out rolling out a little hope for us after I'm painting such a gloomy picture.
No, I think I was gloomy too. But I think with hope, like I said, you have to bring reality into it to arrive at the end goal too. We have to be realistic as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what's next for you in your superpower of awakening awareness?
I do a lot of public speaking. I've done like over 500 engagements. And so I'm really focusing on that right now. Excuse me. But I also am working on some other things, really powerful things with Boss Me, and that I can't announce right now. So definitely stay tuned to my social media, because I am still very much about intergenerational leadership. I think that's very important for this new world, is how do we connect more to understand each other, to then come together to create impact together for solution building. there's always stuff happening with me. So I would just say, yeah, pay attention to my social media or my newsletter as well.
If someone wants to follow you on social or subscribe to your newsletter, where could they find you?
Yeah, just go to maimoore.com, or I'm on Mai Moore at LinkedIn. That's a good place, or Mai Moore at Instagram. And if you want to connect, just ping me. I'd love to always connect.
And I'll put all the links in the description. Mai, are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh boy. Let me wake up a little bit.
Okay, fill in the blank. Awakening awareness is?
The ability to see clearly so we can lead better.
Love that. Who in your life provides awakening awareness for you?
God.
Is there a practice or routine that helps you grow, nurture, or renew your ability to awaken awareness?
Yes. Every morning, thanks to an energy healer in Bali, I do an exercise to let go of some thoughts and clear my chakras and thank God.
Is there a book or movie you recently consumed or watched that you would recommend that has awakening awareness as a theme?
Good one. I just actually watched Love on the Spectrum on Netflix. Highly recommend it. And I'll tell you why. We have to get back to a place of unconditional love. And that series really reminded me how simple love actually is.
What is one thing that gets in your way of awakening awareness?
Money. No, I think there needs to be more invested in women and persons of color who are literally doing the work, who are building. And I'm not saying money is the total answer, but money is a tool that empowers and helps. It's not a negative thing that we've been taught in society. So I need more money to support my different initiatives.
What word or phrase describes what awakening awareness feels like when it's had a positive impact on others?
Power.
Well, Mai, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to join me and share your superpower of awakening awareness. I love this conversation. It sort of reminds me, I don't know if you remember the old comic strip Family Circus. I think we were like little Jeffy and we walked all over the yard on so many topics. But I just come back to that superpower of how important it is to awaken the awareness in each of us. And as several other guests have talked about who have come on around how important it is to be aware to the present moment and to accept everything that's come before, so we don't let those things from the past get in the way of us making decisions for how we want to move forward and how we want to be in this moment. And you just landed this in a new way for me. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful for you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Roger, for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all for being in this conversation with us. And thank you, Mai, for expanding my perspectives on the positive impact of awakening awareness. The question I'm asking myself now after this conversation is, how can I be more aware of the positive and negative impact I'm having on others so that I can appreciate it or be more intentional about it? What Do You Know to Be True is a Three Blue Pens production, and I'm your host, Roger Kastner. We are recording on the ancestral lands of the Duwamish and Suquamish people. To discover the ancestral lands of the indigenous people whose land you may be on, go to native-lands.ca. Okay, be well, my friends. And as always, love you, mean it.